Hello and welcome to the Magical Learning Podcast. As you can see today, I have a guest, Donna McGeorge. I'm very excited to be talking to her about her latest book. But Donna, we always love to start our podcast by, how's your week been? So tell us a little bit about your week.
Actually, my week's been pretty awesome. I got to spend some time with family. I got on top of a few projects that were kind of, not that I'm a productivity person, so I'm not going to say that, things were out of control because they really are, but just a few things I needed to get through. I had one of those weeks of what I call good busy, right?
Nice.
So had some family time, which was fun, got through some work and got to the end of the week and felt like, you know what? That was a good week.
I love it. I love it, Donna. Well, welcome to the podcast. And before we talk about your book, let's talk about your journey so far. So just give our listeners and a viewer a little bit of background about yourself before we move on to your latest book.
It's hard to even know where to start with this with background. So I'll probably talk more about my professional life than I will about my whole life. Even though people sometimes wonder, how did I come to be a productivity person? And I usually say it's because I was raised in a Navy family. Both my parents were in the Navy. But mum left just after they got married because back in the olden days, you weren't allowed to be in the military and married. And so we kind of had a very structured, orderly life. But my dad was a musician. So I kind of got this really awesome, structure, orderly bit with a little bit of ad-libbing and a bit of creativity going on as well. And my mum's a painter and artist. So really nice blend that I got. And then I probably did what most people do is, you go to school, you do a bit of uni, you get a job. And I found that I was, using I don't know how anyone else how other way to say this except to say that I was probably a failed employee. I didn't work very well in organisations. I found that I was much better on my own, and so I got out, and I've been in my own practice now for about 24 years. And the good news is I've never made myself redundant. I've never had to give myself a pretty hard performance review. I've never got in trouble. So yeah, I'm a pretty good employer, actually.
I love that, Donna.
Mm.
And so let's go into your latest book, and I say that because you have a number of books. But you've got a new one. I'd love for you to hold it up if you can show people. So, Red Brick Thinking. Tell us why you wrote about this, and why it's important to our listeners and viewers.
Okay, so I think I've been writing about red brick thinking for about the last 4 books. Frankly. So, just so that I can impress your listeners, this is my 15th book. A bunch of them were self published early on, and then the last 5 or so published with Wiley and considered bestsellers, which has been really nice. But I have been writing, it's a philosophy that I've been writing about, but didn't know that that's what it was called. So,
Sure.
red brick thinking came about because actually came about when I wrote the One Day Refund, and I came across, and I was running workshops and things for that book, and I came across a piece of research out of the US around this idea of addition bias. And so I would share with workshops this little Lego bridge that you can see is crooked, right? So one leg's a lot higher than the other. And I'd say to them, here's the bridge and here's some bricks. How would you make our bridge even? And everyone just would grab a brick and stick it on. They'd say, yeah, now it's even. And this is what's called addition bias. And and it's very common. About 90% of people would add a brick when we're presented with a problem. Our instinct is to add. Yeah. Hardly anyone says
Take
remove the red brick, which also makes our bridge level. But we're taking something away. We're not constantly adding. And so that's what I call the red brick revelation, when you go, oh, yes, I didn't even think about that. And so that then became the book Red Brick Thinking.
I love
And
it.
so this idea, so we turn this idea into a verb. How do I red brick this? What could I red brick today? Is there something I could red brick from my life? So That's where it came from. And so if your listeners are wondering, how do you fill up a whole book with just this idea of remove a red brick? Well, glad you asked. So I'll leave that to later on to talk more
Okay,
about that.
awesome. I love that. And I love the visual that you use for that too. That's gorgeous.
Yes,
So
indeed.
my next question is around that. So what are the red bricks in our lives, in our work, etc., and how do we get rid of them?
So red bricks are anything that are getting in the way of you doing your best work. That's or having your best life, frankly. And so sometimes there's what I call small R red bricks,
Yes.
which are just irritants, meetings that you don't understand why you're going to them. That kind of, can I just check in for 5 minutes thing that gets in the way. Um, and you can also have what I call big R red bricks, and these are the things that are can really be taking up real estate in your head and in your life. And so these could be projects that should have been retired quite some time ago. They could be systems processes. They can be relationships. And one that I often talk about is a long time ago I took up scrapbooking, and I bought all the things. I bought all the paper, the scissors, the stickers, the whole 9 yards. And then, of course, life moved on and I stopped scrapbooking. But I've got a cupboard inside. When I open it, there's like a wall of glitter pens looking at me, judging me. And so not only is it taking up space in my house, it's
Yes.
taking up space in my head because I feel guilty about that.
Yeah.
There's also emotional red bricks, cultural red bricks, structural red bricks. So emotional ones can be like the grudges and the guilt that we carry about stuff, the obligations. Um, Cultural ones are kind of our social mores, our norms that,
Yes.
things like complexity, stimulation, that the fact that we can't let ourselves get bored
Yes.
anymore, and we're constantly needing stimulation. And structural red bricks you find mostly in organizations, and these are the systems and processes and projects that, that's like they're stuck in the walls, but can be removed. They just need a bit of courage and conviction to do so.
I'm really interested because obviously one of the challenges that people face is that whole word no. Um, and how can they actually deliver that with confidence in terms of setting good boundaries and stuff around getting rid of some of these, whether it's the little r or the big R red
Yeah.
bricks?
Do you know, the thing I find about boundaries in general is, and maybe I'm very lucky in my life, but I find that typically if people know about a boundary, they'll
Yep.
respect them.
Yep.
It's just that we're not very good sometimes at telling people our boundaries.
Yep.
And so I'm old enough to remember in the olden days at work, when my daughter was young, if I had to drop her off at school or pick her up after school, I had to sneak in and sneak out. The whole school drop off pickup thing was a boundary that was at work, was you never were allowed to cross that. There was always it was just the way it was back in the
Yes.
80s, go figure, 80s and 90s. Whereas I love it now. It's like that's a boundary that people
Yes.
just say, I can't make that meeting at 9 o'clock. I've got school drop off. And everyone just goes, oh, yeah, okay. We
Yep.
respect that. And if you were to say to people, I have a boundary, and I watch this around our personal life. So my daughter has a job, like rest of us has a job. Um, and twice a week she's part of also the Geelong Symphony Orchestra where she lives. And so twice a week she has to go to rehearsal. So twice a week she's told her boss and says, hey, I've got this rehearsal. It means I really can't work after 5:15. So I'm
Yes.
going to have to knock off so I can get home, grab my instrument and get to rehearsal. And they're fine about it.
Yep.
And of course, because she has a good work ethic, she makes up time if she needs to.
Yes.
So I think the first thing we've got to do is recognize that if you have a boundary, tell people, because I reckon they'll respect it.
Yep.
Now, the thing about saying no, I find this quite fascinating, and just so that your listeners don't think I'm some kind of freak, I struggle with this myself. Saying no is tricky. And it's because we have a whole bunch of obligations, contracts, beliefs, values, all sorts of stuff that are wound up with not wanting to let people down, not wanting to be the team player, not wanting to be the good person, not wanting to be the go-to person. And so we think by saying no, somehow that's messing with who we are and what we do.
Yes.
So something my sister and I practice, this is, she was the one that brought me onto this. She said, you do know, Donna, that no is a complete sentence. And she says that, too often what we do is we buy back the thing. So,
Yes.
Danette, as an example, you say to me, hey, shall we, go out for lunch on Saturday? And my brain goes, oh, I really don't feel like going out for lunch. I'm really tired. I've had a big week. So I say to you, oh, no. And then you just kind of look at me. And then I go, oh, well, maybe I will. I'll try and suddenly I'm buying back this thing that I've already said no
Yes.
to. So I get that we want to be polite. So no thanks, Danette. I've actually had a lot on this week. I love telling the truth. I've had a lot on this week, and I just don't have the capacity for that lunch.
Yep.
And that is also describing a boundary. I've had a lot on. I'm telling you that I have a boundary around my capacity and energy, and I can't do that this week. So it's kind of the first thing I have to say about saying no's is when you're saying no, give the context of your boundary, not an excuse or, not something that you think is what they want to hear or that you're trying to be overly polite or whatever. Because I do think we fall into the I want to be nice thing. But here's the other thing I reckon. So I don't know what came first. This is chicken and egg. What came first? I struggle to say no or you struggle to hear it? Because where did we learn that I had to do this big explanation to say no? And I suspect some cave person years ago said no, and whoever was the other cave person that they were living with said, please explain in some way. And then so now we feel obliged to always explain our no's, right?
Yes.
So I'm wondering for your listeners, yes, it's important to say no with confidence around your boundaries.
Yep.
But I'm going to challenge you to start accepting them. Start accepting no without forcing people to have to make an excuse or to explain themselves. It's actually okay for them to say, do you know what? It just doesn't suit me this weekend.
Nice. Nice. I love that. And so I'm curious, when someone doesn't respect the boundary, or they don't hear that no, how do you come back from that to make sure that you have protected yourself, even if they're not willing to listen?
Well, if they're not willing to listen, this is a whole other conversation, So, Danette, you've already asked me to go out for lunch. I've said no. You've now sent me an invite, assuming I'm coming. You've now told people that I'm coming. You've sent me a request to bring a plate or whatever it might be. So suddenly now I'm feeling the level of obligation just going through the roof, right?
Yep.
So now it's a conversation, and it has to be a phone call conversation. This cannot be emailed or anything like that. And it has to be say, hey, Danette, remember when I told you the other day that I wouldn't be making it because I just don't have the capacity.
Yep.
And if they say, oh, come on, you can do it, toughen up, Bob's going to be there and Susie's going to be there. Everyone will be really disappointed if you don't come. So now they're piling on the guilt because that's the thing. Guilt is a real button that people like pushing, that obligation around guilt. This is where you kind of have to stand your ground. Now, there might be consequences of this. Danette, cross with me, right? You may never invite me to another one again. My friend had this recently. She got invited to a social function. She felt uncomfortable about going. So she said to the person, no, I'm not going. Had to get through 2 begging style conversations.
Yeah.
And she rang me and she said, I think that friendship might be busted now because I stuck my ground and I wouldn't come around to their way of thinking. Now, in workplaces, this can be really tricky.
Yes.
Because, with a friendship, maybe I can afford to lose a friendship or not, I don't know. But in workplaces, it can be really tricky. But I keep coming back to holding your ground, doing it with a smile, being really, look, I just don't have the capacity for it right now. I'm really kind of full. I'm not even inclined to say sorry, but you could probably say, look, I'm really sorry on this occasion, I can't make it. But then can you feel like even saying on this occasion I can't make it is buying you into the next one?
Yeah.
Can you feel that?
So maybe not add that last sentence.
Maybe not. That's why I'm a bit uninclined to say sorry, because I'm actually not. And maybe next time. No, I still don't want to go. So I'm thinking it's got to be in that first instance, and
Yes.
then the reminder to the person that said, "Oh, look, thanks for all this. I actually said I couldn't make it
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
that." Yeah.
Nice. Thank
Now,
you.
I also say use this with caution around work. I don't want,
Yeah.
career limiting moves. Sometimes there's things we have to do. You can't just say, no, I don't want to do that. There's things we have to do.
Yes.
So I say, check your job description, you know.
I love that. Oh, so then my next question is, what's your favorite practical tip? Because we love practical tips here to help, whether it's our listeners, our viewers who are struggling with to create space. Because I reckon part of the whole red brick thing is, getting space for yourself. So what's the most practical tip that you like to provide to people around that?
I've got dozens.
Oh,
These 3 books are full of them. No, that's a bit of a plug. The 3. They're from the It's About Time series.
awesome.
They're what I would call tip books, full of tips. But a
Nice.
couple that I really like, I would say one is pay attention to the clock in your body, not the one on the wall.
Yeah, nice.
So there are certain times of day that's better to do things than others. And certainly for most of us, over 80% of us, we are at our best in terms of our mental capacity and alertness in the morning up to about midday. Yep, I'm definitely. That's why I wrote the book, First 2 hours, right? That's me. And so protecting that time to do your most important thinking, your most important work, or difficult conversations, or solving difficult problems, that's the best thing to do. Now, you don't have to use the whole morning for that, but that's a good time of day to do it. It's certainly, you don't want to waste that time in the morning
Yes.
burning through email and just responding to everyone else's agenda, right? So the afternoon is good for doing email.
Yep.
And so I know that kind of sometimes makes people vomit a bit in their mouth, the idea that I'm suggesting that you don't do your email till the afternoon. I scan my email and I do responses that need my brain to be switched on. I'll do those in the morning. But
Yes.
the afternoon is for the yep, nup, delete, file,
Yeah, nice.
noted kind of
Yep.
messages.
Yep.
So that's one thing. Pay attention to the clock in your body, not the one on the wall, and protect your best thinking time for your most important stuff. And the second thing that kind of supports that is the end of the day, block off about half an hour and do things that your future self will thank you for.
I love
So
that.
for me, that can be, if I'm doing a job the next day, I'll plan my outfit. If I'm driving somewhere, I'll plan the route. If I have a series of meetings, I'll book, I'll have a look and go, what have I got to prepare for that? So for a podcast recording, I'll get notes and I'll go, right, what have I got to do tomorrow? What have I got on in my calendar tomorrow? What do I need to prep for that? Um, and and if I'm really wanting to make the best use of my first 2 hours, my most productive time from an alertness and mental capacity perspective, then I'll plan what are the things I'm going to do tomorrow morning and
Nice.
how can I set myself up for success. I'm a clean desk policy gal, so I tidy up my desk and I just make sure I've got all the things good to go.
Yep.
And I'm looking around because I'm looking around my desk, all the things I've got good to go. So tomorrow when I hit the ground running, I'm good.
Yep.
So those
Nice.
2 things: pay attention to the clock in the wall, clock in your body, not the one on the wall, and
Yep.
do things in the afternoon, in that last part of the day, that your future self will thank you for.
I love that. I love that. They're 2 great tips. So, Donna, one of the things we love to ask our author guests is about their writing process, because we have a number of listeners and viewers who are thinking about writing, etc. And given you've written 15 books, I reckon you've probably got a system that people might want to learn from.
You know, First of all, it always comes down to I have to write about things that are of interest to me.
Nice.
And so I, every book I've written, I've been interested in, and B, there's an aspect of writing I'm curious about learning. So I
No.
won't go through the whole lot, but my very first book, which was self-published, and the reason I wrote it was I liked the topic matter. It was called The Pen is Mightier Than the Slide. And the second thing is I wanted to learn about the self-publishing process, how to write the book and how to self-publish.
Yes.
My first Wiley book was the 25-minute meeting, so I'm just jumping ahead. And
Yes.
I wanted to learn what was it like to write a book with a mainstream publisher and have a book at the airport. I wanted to learn about what that was like. So that's kind of the first step for me is it a topic that I can get behind? And secondly, what I want to learn.
Yep.
from writing this book.
Yep.
And then my process is I've been very fortunate, probably for what I would call my mainstream books that I
Yes.
published with Wiley. Been very fortunate to work with Kelly Irving, who's an exceptional editor, and she's done a fair few books of myself and some colleagues. She's done all of my mainstream books. And she has a process, and anyone can do this. You don't need Kelly for this. But
Yes.
basically it is, she introduced it to me. I go to a publisher website, whether I'm planning to use a publisher or not.
Yep.
Somewhere on a publisher's website, there'll be an author's questionnaire or a book proposal or
Yep.
some kind of document that you need to fill in order to
Yes.
pitch your idea
Yep.
to the publisher.
Yes.
And so the ChatGPT revolution, for example, the publisher asked me to write that. I still did the book proposal.
Nice.
Because what the book proposal does is it forces you to think about why this book, why is the topic important, who's the audience that you're writing for, what else is out in the world, do a comparison analysis, and it asks you to answer questions like, what other writing have you done? Tell us about your blogs, because the Wiley one, for example, asks you what articles have you written in any other context, and it forces you to do an audit of everything you've got and get super clear on, who you're writing it for, why they need it, and then it always asks you for a chapter outline and a first or sample chapter or something like that. So that's a really good process to do, whether you're going to pitch it to a publisher or not. Because a lot of people think it, and my process is not this, that you just kind of open a Word document and go, chapter 1, here's what I think about this today.
Yes.
So that's the first thing, is do that. The second thing I'd say is, again, I don't really want to put myself in the same class as this person because, Hemingway. But Hemingway always said, write drunk, edit sober. And so I don't do that because I don't write drunk and edit sober. But I do write first, edit later.
Yeah, nice.
And so I'll often just throw stuff at it like it's like if it was a sculpture, I'd be throwing clay at it, right? I just throw content in. Sometimes the book, and that's certainly the case with this last one, was a lot more emergent than the others. So these three here were very structured around models and things like that. And I don't know how many of your listeners understand the language of pink sheets, but those three were very structured around pink sheets and models. This one had some, but not as strict, because I didn't have a model in this one. This was more of a manifesto, so it kind of emerged more. But it's still kind of the same process. Get word count in there, and then I massage later. And so write first, edit later.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that process. So then we're just about at the end. So is there anything else that you'd like to share with our listeners and our viewers around red brick thinking?
Well, first of all, saying red brick thinking is a bit of a mouthful, but it's not as much as a mouthful as what it's really about, which is it's ultimately about strategic subtraction. And even I have to slow myself down to say that, because strategic subtraction, try to say that 10 times in a row, right? So what I'd like to share is how to recognize whether it might be a red brick in your world or not. And there's usually signs, right? It's taking more energy than it should. You don't look forward to it. You kind of drop your shoulders. It's a meeting. If you look around the table and if everyone's sitting there going about the meeting, then that's probably an opportunity to red brick. If you work in organizations or you have a team around you, find the person who's been there the shortest. Like I always say, someone who's been there 3 months, and say, wilders you about what we do? What are you curious about why we do things? Because that'll help people, try to identify them. But it's like, so spot them, question them. Why did I even start doing it in the first place? Remove them without thinking too much about it, and then feel how good that feels when because you know how light it feels when you let something go. Like, just take a moment to feel the lightness, and then just spread the word. Red brick thinking.
Nice. Where's that book, Donna?
Oh, hang on. Here's the book, Red Brick Thinking.
I love it. So, Donna, I reckon there's going to be some listeners and viewers that would love to reach out to you. So where's the best places for them to find you?
All right, I have a very unusual surname, so even if you just Google Donna McGeorge, you're just going to get bombarded with stuff. But my website, donnamcgeorge.com, probably my primary social media platform is LinkedIn, but you'll also find me on, again, just search my name. You'll find me on Instagram and Facebook and Threads. And you'll get the book, of course, at all the great online bookstores. I'll send you links to put in the show notes, that links to where to where to order the book and where to get my other books as well.
Beautiful. So, Donna, thank you so much for joining us today, and congratulations on the latest book. And to all of our listeners and our viewers, thank you for following us, for sharing, and have a magical week.